everyone, I'm Nick Slavic. I am I'm adjusting this right now, but I am the proprietor of the Nick Slavic Painting and Restoration Company. I'm also the host of this program, Ask a Painter Live, on Facebook Live every Friday, where I use my 2 decades of painting, restoration, color consultation, wallpaper, furniture refinishing, decorative finishing experience to answer any of your painting questions. As always, if you would like to see a particular topic expounded on at length in this program, send it to me, Facebook Messenger, or just post it on Facebook, #AskAPainter. You can also ask any of your questions live during this broadcast. Now, each one of these Ask a Painter segments has a topic. I update you on some of my projects, things like that. But ask any questions, related, unrelated, business-wise, entrepreneurship, handling employees, choosing colors, particular tools, experiences, things like that. Ask anything you want and I will answer it live here. So thank you guys for tuning in today. Today I'm going to go over a couple of viewer questions that I was sent during the last week. I will also update you on a couple of projects that I'm working on. And I didn't really know where I was going to be today. Turns out I am on the last 2 minutes of a basement finishing project that I've been working on for a couple months here. I'm just doing my final walkthrough, making sure everything's up to par after all the contractors are done, and making sure that these homeowners, have exactly what they need done as far as finishes. So, again, thanks for liking this feed. Thanks for sharing it. There is a button on the live feed. You can follow me, and anytime I go live, you can get an instant update, and you can chime in and watch that. Again, send in all your questions, do your topics. Update on this project here, started a couple months ago, doesn't really take a lot of time. It was basically a brand new project, went from a blank basement. We completely finished walls and ceilings here, flat white on the ceiling obviously, coated drywall primer on the walls, sanded down, cleaned up again, and then 2 top coats of a nice eggshell finish paint. So a topic we'll be talking about later today, builder's flat, which is sort of the proverbial new construction finish that everybody hates so much. I am morally opposed to this. This is, again, one of those questions that I always ask myself: is it better for you as a contractor, or is it better for the homeowner? That's a clear case of this is way better for the contractor than it is for the homeowner. It's ultra flat, it goes on easy. A lot of times the guys don't even prime the drywall, so you can save yourself a coat. It's ultra flat, so it hides all the flaws in the drywall. So when the homeowners get into their brand new house, the walls look perfect, but as soon as one of their kids or pets or some cooking mess gets on the wall and they try to wash it, the rag turns the color of the wall, and it's not doable. And most guys don't leave them touch-up paint, so at that point they basically have to live with it, or they can repaint. So I immediately, my standard new construction finish is obviously a primer. You sand the primer down nice and smooth, and then two top coats. In this case, I used an eggshell paint, very high quality eggshell paint, to give them that tough finish right from the start. So there's 3 colors down here. A bedroom behind me over here is a nice dark brown. We have a blue accent wall, media wall here, and a nice taupey kind of gray throughout here. And as typical here, there's some barnwood, there's some lots of different surfaces, kind of a gun stock finish on the wood, which is actually really cool. You don't see it very often. And one particular unique thing are these 3 speaker grills here. I painted them. Now it seems simple to just paint a speaker grill, but it's getting harder and harder to do that. 10 or 20 years ago, you could take a speaker grill and you could just dry brush it, where you put a finish brush in a little bit of paint, you wipe it dry so there's almost no paint on there, and you can just kind of dry brush it, whisking paint all the directions to get in the little crevices and holes, and it turns out well. Now, I think the hole diameter is getting smaller, or they're using a different finish, but nowadays when you try to dry brush, it gets streaky, you end up filling a lot of the holes. So a trick that I do, and I did it for these people too, is that I take them to my shop, and in this case it was actually pretty easy. There's a very dark bluish navy kind of blackish color here. I spray painted them with a black oil primer on both sides to fill all the little crevices, and then what you do, you use a combination of either HVLP gun in my shop, which I tried, it put on a little too thick of a coat of paint, so I went back to dry brushing. If you fill these speakers with black oil primer first, get them nice and smooth, everything's good, dry, the paint can adhere, and then you go back to dry brush, they finish beautifully. And as much as you can get speaker grills to blend in with the wall, They do. You know, you're not going to make them disappear, but that's about as good as you can do with what you have there. So, little trick there that I've just had to learn with over the years. I started with a project a bunch of years ago. I dry brushed some of these speakers. Just didn't really, they always just looked off like that. So then I finally made the decision, I'm taking these suckers to my shop and I'm going to do this like a professional should. So in the stream of constant improvement, it's excessive, but it's perfect, and there's really not another way. If these homeowners just wanted a black satin, I could easily just go get a spray can of something and do that. But since they wanted to match the wall color and the finish of the wall color, you could certainly go get an industrial enamel or something else, but way too much time, way too much effort for something that's a relatively simple job, and the finish wouldn't match the finish on the wall. So, no, as well as those can hide, those do, and I thought it turned out pretty well. So, another project that I'm working on now, and I thought I might be at this one during this time, is the cabinet refinishing project that I'm doing over in Prior Lake, a couple miles away. My crew is slaving away over there right now. We are putting the final top coat on the cabinets in the house today. All the cabinet doors and drawers and little bits and pieces that I can take out of there are in my shop, and we'll be starting the front of the doors. It's about a 4-day process to get the doors to where I can actually start finishing the fronts of them, so that when I do finish the fronts, they're all resting flat and on their backs, and they're dried and they're cured, and it's a very invasive process. Usually takes me about 6 days to turn out a set of cabinet doors from a kitchen, because the way I like to finish them, because of the products I use, things like that. But the gist of it is clean and sand your cabinets. You put a coat of oil primer on there, let that cure. You sand down the oil primer to a nice glass smooth area. You fix imperfections, and then 2 coats of an enamel over the top. And in this particular house, what most of mine are, Benjamin Moore Advanced Satin. It's a very good product, a little shinier than a satin, but I think it's a good medium between semi-gloss and satin. And I find that if I bump up against any lower shines, people seem to like a little higher shine on their trim, and I don't mind a nice satin, a nice luster on it, but it seems like most people want a good, somewhere between satin and semi-gloss, moving towards semi-gloss, something like that. So, first question that we have today is from Jay Larson. Jay says, we bought a new house last year. His wife does daycare, and there's handprints everywhere on the walls. I try to clean it with a damp rag, just smears and looks like expletive deleted. Is it cheap paint? Do I need to repaint, or is there a way to fix it? This is the proverbial builder's flat. There is no benefit to use builder's flat except to the contractor and the person who's building the house. And I can guarantee you that these people who are finishing houses with builder's flat aren't charging any less than I am. They're just skipping a whole bunch of labor and stuff. And on the day that these people move in, the house that I finish versus a house that a very low-end new construction painter finishes will look relatively the same, although I spend a little more time fixing nicks and bumps and things like that because I have to with my shinier finish. But the real test is 5 to 10 years later. Between 5 and 10 years later, builder's flat, if you have any young people or any pets in your house, or if you actually just use your house, it's a disaster. You can't touch it. If you walk down a hallway and you rub your elbow against the wall, you're going to burnish it and you leave a mark, and it doesn't look good. With my stuff, it's got a nice shell. Yes, it's more work. It could be twice as much work in some cases, depending on how well the drywallers do their job, but it is worth it because you're setting these homeowners up for a potential 10 to 15 year finish. And if it's an elderly couple with no kids, no pets, that's it. There's the finish is the life of that finish is basically endless, because if there are just 2 adults living in a house, they don't ever touch the walls magically. If you don't have kids and you don't have pets, surprisingly, your walls stay beautiful. So you're basically setting it up for an endless time span on a finish like that. So Jay, what I would say is that your house has got a very good start. Basically, what new construction paint or the builder's flat is a good primer. Sand it down. You don't have to sand like you're sanding wood to remove material. Just take a nice sanding sponge, take a random orbital sander with a 200 grit or something, and just buff the wall just to kind of make it accepting to new paint. 2 coats of very, very high quality, either eggshell or satin interior paint. Something that's 100% acrylic, something that'll dry, give you a nice hard shell, and not only will you be able to wash that up later, it's actually more resistant to abrasion and mechanical damage as well. So if you are the 1% of people who have a 5-gallon bucket of this crappy, chalky, watered down paint left in your house from the builder, touch it up for sure. You can get away with that for a long time. Somewhere between 4 and 8 years, paint usually turns, either because the can is cracked and it's evaporating, or it wasn't stored in the correct place. But usually you can get a lot of touch-up out of one of those things. Now, if you don't have any touch-up paint from before, you'll have to either cut a section of the wall out and color match it. If you have a record of when you guys bought the house of the paint color, at least you have that to go to the new paint. No new paint, even if you have to go get paint now. Let's say it was Sure Scrub, which is a very, very low-end kind of builder's paint. If you go to Sherwin-Williams and you say, well, we know it's Tyler Taupe and we know it was Sure Scrub, just mix me up a gallon and I'll touch it up. There is almost no chance that that will touch up the same. So even if it's same paint, same color, whatever else, what I caution my homeowners, I get asked quite a bit of times before people sell their houses, you know, we got cans of paint in the basement, would you just touch up the whole house and then we'll sell it? I tell them that you're almost guaranteed to never have that touch up. Even if it's same gallon, same paint, same stuff that was used on the wall, for whatever reason, even if the color matches, the shine usually won't match. So Jay, in this particular case, it's just a simple repaint. And you know, like I said before, nothing wrong was done to your house, they just didn't complete the process. It's step 1 of about 3 or 4 steps. So all you have to do is put on the new paint. The good news is that builder's flat accepts it perfectly, soaks in very quickly, always adheres, and actually gives you a nice kind of low luster, kind of eggshell finish if you use a paint like that. So Roxy Stika, she wrote in and asked, hi Nick, I was wondering if you had any suggestions on how to cover striped walls. I really appreciate your help, and if I don't have to do any sanding, that would be ideal. Instantly, a lot of flaws in walls, especially a house that's maybe been a rental or maybe it's been painted by homeowners a bunch of times, usually has tons and tons of flaws in the wall. And I see these flaws in the form of people tried to patch over something, they didn't really sand it, sort of just left it on there, 2 or 3 coats of paint later, it's sort of part of the wall. You can sand those down a little, but whether it's outside, whether it's inside, acrylic or latex or water-based paint does not sand all that well. People think, well, you know, we'll just take a sander to it and we'll just get this wall perfectly flat like it was a bare piece of wood or it's drywall mud. It doesn't work that way. If you take a random orbital sander to latex paint and hold it there hard enough and long enough, you actually heat the paint up, it gets rubbery, and it starts sticking to the pad. Now, what you can do is, in the case of a striped wall, when people tape off stripes, however thick that paint or that tape is, that's going to be the thickness of the paint ridge that's going to be there. Now, and I'll tell you about one that I just did a couple weeks ago to remedy this. You can sand that a little. Don't ever expect sanding to do it alone. The easiest thing you can do, you know, the low-hanging fruit, if you don't want to do any sanding, if you don't want to do any skim coating or mudding, and you just want to minimize the stripes, use an ultra flat paint, but use a very high quality ultra flat paint. You could use builder's flat over it and that would hide them fairly well, but then you're going to get smudges all over and everything else. If you use you know, a paint somewhere between 30 and 50 bucks a gallon, maybe a little bit higher in their lowest sheen, it'll be a high quality paint. It'll still be sort of washable, mechanical abrasion resistant, but you won't get that crazy shine. The higher shine you go, the more flaws in the wall and stripes you're going to see. So easiest thing to do, just go over with a very high quality flat paint. You'll minimize most of it, but if you're a perfectionist or you want it done right, you're going to have to do something to those stripes. So what I normally do is I sand them right away, either by a palm sander, a sanding sponge, you know, a medium grit, give or take, or I take a random orbital sander and load up maybe a 180 grit, and I just sort of buff the wall with it. I'm not holding it in one place, pushing hard, getting that stuff, but I'm sort of working it like you're kind of polishing a car around like this, just to minimize the ridges. And you'll be able to feel a big difference after that. But that's not, you know, that's okay. For most homeowners, when they do something like that, it's a lot of work. When they're done, they're really happy with the project, even if you can see a faint bit of lines. But the problem is when they hire me, they don't want to see any lines. So what I do is I sand them down, and then I get lightweight drywall mud, loosen it up a little bit sometimes with water just to get it going, and I take my 12-inch drywall tool, and I take my Mud Hawk, and I just load up a bunch of that mud, and I give it a very, very light skim coat. Something where you can still see the wall color underneath it, things like that. You know, let it dry overnight, and then I just give it a quick sand. And in a normal bedroom, it would normally take me maybe an hour or two to skim coat, and then you know, way less than an hour to sand, maybe even 40 minutes, give or take. Because if you put the mud on too heavy, you're going to have to be leveling it off. If you barely put a nice skim over the top of it, you're basically just going like this, just knocking off the ridges from the thing and then moving on. I usually use a shop vac with a brush attachment sort of in one hand and the sander in the other. I've used the brush attachments for shop vacs, but I find that with the cord there, you don't have the dexterity as when you just have a sanding pad in your hand. So I kind of do, shop vac in one hand and then sander in the other and kind of work it around that way. So that seems to be a really, really good way to do it. It is a little more work, but the problem is, the problem is that when somebody gets me in their house, they expect more than what the average homeowner would expect of themselves. So I have to take it to another little level like that. And I just did a bedroom a couple weeks ago for somebody in New Prague here, and they had a striped wall, very dark blue, very light white, and there were very thick ridges on it. And I used that same process there, and it turned out really well, especially because there was a window raking light over it. And it's never as perfect as when you can get a brand new drywall, but it's the best thing you can do for the right amount of time. I mean, certainly, I always offer, the homeowners to say, well, you know what, if you want it like a brand new wall, I can spend the time on it, or you can get a drywaller in. And the problem is that most drywallers won't return people's calls for a small project like that. So I sort of try to offer something in between that's not tearing off all the drywall and starting over versus just painting over it. So somewhere in between, I try to offer something economical for my homeowners. So that's about the best way to handle the stripes there. I will go through some of the questions, see what everybody's up to today. Oh, David Olson, I see you were watching here. He's actually finishing his basement right now. If you're still watching, Dave, let us know how that's going there. Steph Benzik, we have the builders flat paint and hate it. Is there something I can do to clean my walls of fingerprints and kids' messes? Sadly, same thing that Jay asked here. There's just nothing you can do to it. You can try. My wife has actually used with a tiny bit of success on good paint the Magic Sponge, I believe it's called. It's just those white sort of Mr. Clean or 3M things. It's there's something magic in the name, but you get it wet, you wring it out, and it's the actual texture of the foam it has just enough abrasive to take stuff out. And my wife's actually had really good luck with that stuff in our own home, but I have some pretty high quality finishes in the house and things like that, but it's taken off some pretty tough stuff. So I would try that. Only costs a couple bucks, can't hurt, you'll have it for later. Honestly, if you have a large area to do, if it's a backsplash or something in your kitchen, you might be able to just repaint that with whatever paint they left, or get some new stuff and kind of blend it in a little bit. But honestly, the only way to get it to the level that most people want is to just repaint. So sadly, like I said before, builder's flat is one part of about a 3 or 4 part process. So they got a good start, and they'll just, you can take it from there, kind of finish the process for them. Christian, your trim lines look pretty crisp from here in my shop in Philly. Do you freehand or tape? If you tape, do you tape after the trim and paint, then hit it with a product like guards? No, actually frog tape. I've been a big believer of frog tape over the years, and I would love to have this debate with a bunch of the pros watching, and homeowners too. It seems like the paint world is divided, maybe 60-40, 60% tape, 40% not, and I could be wrong on that. That's just from my experiences here, but I am a firm believer of taping. I don't believe that people can get as crisp a line as quickly as when I tape. I'm a big believer of frog tape, like I said. I was introduced to it probably 10 years ago. It was actually made about 30 miles from where I live now. It was a small company, a sort of technology company that comes up with household innovations. They dropped some at my local hardware store, me being the painter from my store. They gave some to me to try it out. I tried it out and I loved it. I immediately wrote the company who was doing it, and I said, I just love this stuff. There's a noticeable difference. When I use blue tape, I went through the progression over the years. When my dad started me 20 or 25 years ago, tan tape, obviously, 42 cents a roll, sticks to everything, it does fine, but then you end up spending a half an hour at the end of the job with a razor kind of just cleaning up whatever bled through. Then, you progress to blue tape, and that does a much better job. But still, in the course of an average bedroom, there's one or two touch-ups, something that leaked by, something that didn't adhere as well, and that's fine. That's sort of the industry standard. But just like if anybody who's been following my post, I'm kind of on this quest for constant improvement, whether it's speaker grills or whether it's the new sprayer that I bought for my fine finishing. I'm constantly on the quest for what's next, what's better, how can I improve, if only incrementally. Frog tape was it. It's got the, and 3M has the product now, Edge Lock, but they have the chemical on either edge of the tape, and it, believe it or not, it's actually the same chemical or a similar chemical that they use in diapers to coagulate liquids. So when liquid hits the edge of that tape, it coagulates immediately and stops the paint from bleeding through. So when me and the guys do a somewhere between 3 and 5 rooms in a day, start to finish, we tear the tape off, my expectation is 0 touch-ups, and it happens probably 98% of the time. It is a little more expensive, but when you consider the price, to paint a bedroom, you use less than a roll of tape. For the price of that, for the couple bucks of tape you use, I honestly have not seen a painter, and I would certainly love to see it if somebody can. I would love to see a side-by-side comparison of somebody like me who can tape a room very efficiently with frog tape, start to finish, clean the room out, tape it, patch it, paint 2 coats over it, and then see how quick and how good the room looks compared to somebody who does no taping at all and hand cuts everything. I am a true believer, and again, this is one of those things where penny wise and pound foolish. You may want to save the $4.25 on a bedroom worth of tape, but for the homeowners, that's very hard for me to justify saving $4 to having maybe an uneven line or taking all that extra time and charging them for labor for that. So I'm a huge believer in tape. In the average bedroom with an entry door, a closet, 2 windows, and a whole bunch of baseboard, honestly, it takes me 12 minutes to tape. It's nothing. You get a cleaning brush in one hand, painter's tool in the other, lock that stuff down as quick as you can go. It's about as easy as it gets. So to me, it's a no-brainer. I would love to hear other pros and other homeowners weigh in on that stuff, because I often hear, people come up and say, oh, my cousin's a painter. He's so good, he doesn't even need to paint or doesn't even need to tape. And he may be, but I would really question his efficiency and his rate of production and then the final product as well. So I see a lot of guys post a lot of pictures of cutting baseboards and things by hand, and it looks great over the internet or these videos. But I would hazard a guess that if you got right up close, 2 inches away from it, you would tell a big difference between a tape job versus not. So Christian, in this particular case, this is best case scenario. The contractors that did this project are some of my favorite contractors in the area, and I trust them. There's probably only 1 or 2 guys I trust to actually install finished trim after I've finished painted walls. Most of the time in my new construction process, I will prime all the walls, I'll get them sanded, I'll do my patching, and then I'll just leave the project alone. If the woodwork is stained and varnished, I will have them install it finished. I'll pre-finish all of it. They'll install it, I'll come back and then tape all the woodwork and do the final finish coats. That way, that's if there's a contractor who's good, but isn't good enough to not mess up the walls. The guys who did this, the Skuzaczeks from our area here, are the best carpenters we have, and I trust them on all the. I've done enough houses with them where I feel fully comfortable to completely paint all these walls, finish coat, finish product, exactly like it should, and then have them do the trim. Now, in this particular project, they had a whole bunch of cabinets and counters and everything after, and I knew going in, because of timeline, I didn't have time to do it after. I finish coated, and there was maybe 6 or 7 touch-ups down here that I had to take care of. So exactly what you would expect, but I was really impressed by the cabinet and the counter guys here too. They actually took care of the walls, which was kind of nice. So as far as square footage and the intricacy of this basement goes, almost no touch-up comparable to what I see in a lot of houses. So let's see what else we got here. Lisa Johnson, would you paint wainscoting the same way as cabinets? Yes, but it all depends what it is. If it's wainscoting in a house already, stained and varnished oak or alder or pine or something like that, same process. If it's brand new stuff, I follow the same process minus the part. Sorry about that phone call coming through. I do the same thing, except that you don't have to remove any cooking grease from new stuff. You don't have to remove any hand oil, scratches, dents, nicks, things like that. So basically it's the same thing. Anytime I finished a pre-finished piece of cabinet, wood, trim, anything, anytime I finish brand new wood, it's basically a 3-coat process, whether you're stain and varnishing it or whether you're enameling it. You prime it when you enamel it, and then you do 2 top coats over the top. That's the basis, and things can change based on the homeowner's needs and the finishes. And when you stain and varnish a piece of woodwork, the stain is the first coat you add the color with, and then you add 2 coats of an oil varnish over the top. Don't ever use lacquer, my personal opinion. So yeah, that's basically the process. So if you take that sort of way of thinking, you can apply to just about everything. Specific projects need certain things, but for the most part, that's sort of my ethos and the way I address that stuff. Oh, Roxy, I'm glad you got to see the show today. No problem. April Brown, we painted our cabinets, our bathroom white. So far it looks nice, but there's one spot that turned yellowish. Will all of it turn yellow? My guess is that it's a knot hole. If it's pine, if it's alder, if it's any wood with knot holes in it, even oak and things like that, knot holes are a congregation, where a branch comes out the side of a tree, and it's a congregation of sap and resin and tannic acid and all those things that make wood bleed. So what you have to do, and that's why I'm a firm believer in oil primer. The push in the industry right now is to get everybody to use water-based finishes. Water-based finishes do a pretty good job of sealing stains and adhesion. They're not there yet. A shellac-based primer, which I'm sort of a fan of, mainly for water stains on ceilings, a can of Upshot or something like that. But I'm still a firm believer in oil primer over anything, because you never know when something's going to bleed. Oil primer is the nuclear option. You slam down the red button, you get out your red phone, oil primer, it will solve almost every problem. The problem that people have with oil primer is that it smells bad, it's a little difficult to work with, you got to know what you're doing, but once you put it on, it will always adhere, and it will always block stains as long as you've done your prep right. So the best thing to do with that, hopefully it's a small area where you can address it, I would spray it with a little shellac primer. If it's a cabinet drawer or something, take that off, prep it fully, sand it down a little bit, prep it with some shellac primer, and then repaint it with whatever top coat you did. You'll find that the stain goes away pretty easy. I would assume that was probably not the only knot hole in the cabinet, so if you start seeing them in the future, what you have to do is just scuff sand the entire cabinet, get a coat of oil primer on it, and then sort of start the process over, another 2 coats. So that's usually the easiest way to do it. Oh, Dave, talking about his basement project going well, little touch up on the ceiling, and waiting for final, contractors are done, a few gouges, countertop insulation, yeah, those are the main offenders of the wall gouges. They like to dig out walls, things like that too. Made you to chat with me about the stairwell. Yeah, I'll drop off an extension ladder for you anytime. That should be no problem. So, okay. Thanks everybody for tuning in. I always appreciate it. Send any topic suggestions. Send any of your questions either during this feed or during the week. I'll use my over 2 decades of experience to answer those for you. I will give you project updates as well if you guys like, and we will take it from there. Anything you post online, if you want me to see it, either send it to me or hashtag #AskAPainter. We'll get to it there. I just got word there's some planning going on for the Painting and Decorating Contractors of America Expo coming up in late February. It looks like I might be presenting something during that. That'll be a very interesting thing. So any of you pros who are a member of the PDCA or not, look into going out there. It's going to be really interesting out there this year. I hear that they're going to revive the debate, which was a very interesting thing last year, and hopefully I can get to be on a part of that again. But I'll be starting to work on these topics, and as things come to mind, I'll be kind of using this as my sounding board to see what people think, and we'll go from there. So thank you guys so much for tuning in, and we will see you next week.